Let's talk about a fundamental flaw in the way most of us study. It's a kind of hidden trap that makes hours of hard work feel completely pointless.
You know the feeling. It's incredibly frustrating. You spend a whole afternoon highlighting, rereading your notes. You feel like you're being really productive. But then the test comes, or maybe just the next morning, and it's gone. So what is actually happening in your brain in those moments?
And here's the hard truth at the center of all this. Our brains are really, really good at tricking us. As we review our notes, we start to feel comfortable with the material. But that feeling of comfort, it's dangerously misleading.
There's actually a name for this. Psychologists call it the familiarity bias. See, we mistake how easy it is to recognize information for the ability to actually recall it from memory. Recognizing a term on a page feels like you know it, but that's a completely different thing from being able to pull that definition out of your head when you need it.
So why does this bias have such a powerful hold on us? Well, the reason comes down to the fundamental difference between two ways of learning: passive exposure versus active struggle.
Just look at the contrast in feeling here. Passive learning, rereading, highlighting, it feels good. It feels easy and productive, but it's shallow. Active learning, on the other hand, feels difficult. Trying to pull an idea from your memory is a struggle, but that struggle is exactly where the real learning happens. You're forcing your brain to build and strengthen connections, not just glance at them.
And this quote just nails it. The solution isn't to spend more hours with a highlighter, it's to completely change your strategy from a passive review to an active one. We're aiming for effectiveness here, not just putting in a time.
Okay, so if passive learning is the trap, how do we actually escape? Well, fortunately, cognitive science has given us several powerful evidence-based techniques that force us into that productive struggle of active learning. Let's start with one of the most effective ones, the Feynman technique. It's not just about learning, it's more like a diagnostic tool. Its main purpose is to brutally expose the holes in your understanding, because, well, you can't explain what you don't truly know.
The magic really happens in steps 2 and 3. When you try to teach that concept out loud and you stumble, or you get stuck on some jargon you can't explain, that's gold. That moment of frustration is a signpost, pointing you directly to what you need to study next. Then you can go back, fill that specific gap, and make your explanation even simpler.
And you can see here, it's not a straight line. It's a loop. You research, you teach, you find the gaps, you refine, and you do it again. That's what gets you from just recognizing something to actually truly understanding it.
All right, next up is a technique that feels a little counterintuitive at first: interleaving. Most of us study in blocks, right? We'll do an hour of one subject, then an hour of another. Interleaving says to mix it all up. So you might do one algebra problem, then a geometry problem, then back to algebra.
And here's why this works so well. When you study in blocks, your brain settles into a comfortable groove. But interleaving forces it to work way harder. It has to constantly switch gears and choose the right strategy for each problem. That difficulty is what builds the mental flexibility you actually need for a real exam.
The third technique is so simple, but it's really powerful. It's called dual coding. It's based on the idea that our brains process information through two separate channels, one for verbal stuff and one for visual stuff. When you use both of those channels at the same time, you create a much stronger memory.
A mind map is a perfect example of this in action. You're not just writing down a list of words, you're physically arranging them in space, you're showing the relationships between them, and you're building a visual structure for the information. You're creating a mental model, which is so much more powerful than just reading a page of text. Now, you might be thinking this is all just about getting better grades, but the cost of this inefficient, passive studying, it goes way beyond the classroom. It really impacts your health and your well-being in very real ways.
Think about it. When you spend hours studying without seeing results, it's not just frustrating, it is draining. Research shows a direct link between these ineffective habits and a lot of negative outcomes. You end up studying more, sleeping less, feeling more stressed out, and just having less time for the rest of your life. 40%. In one study, that's how many college students reported high levels of academic fatigue. And we're not just talking about feeling tired after a long night. This is a chronic state of exhaustion. That same research defines it clinically as a psychophysiological state of decreased ability and effectiveness. In other words, it's a state where your brain and body are actively working against you. It's the ultimate example of studying harder, not smarter. I know this might sound like a lot to change, but you don't have to overhaul your entire routine overnight. The key is to just start with one small, manageable action to prove to yourself that this works.
So here it is. This is your first step.
It's like a mini Feynman technique. Just pick one concept. It could be anything. The important part is to put the book away and rely only on your own memory. Just try to explain it out loud.
And this is the most important part. When you stumble, don't get discouraged. That moment of hesitation, that feeling of confusion, that's not failure. That's a signal. It's your brain showing you exactly where the real learning needs to begin.
By choosing the productive struggle of active recall over the false comfort of passive learning, you're doing more than just studying smarter. You're reclaiming your time and your energy. So the real question is, what would change for you?